you own one of these fluff gremlins, or are you thinking of owning one of these demonic fluff balls? If that's the case, keep watching, because in this video we are going to go through some of the most surprising things about owning these demons of chaos. A little introduction, my name's Ali, I'm an owner of chinchillas and I'm also a former breeder, and I have been keeping chinchillas for many years. So let's get started with surprising thing number 1. Their vocal range and the sounds they make. Now this generally does actually surprise a lot of people because they're not expecting such loud noises to come from such a small animal. And the noises that generally make people the most freaked out are the alarm barking and also the crying and screaming sound. Now, if you want more information about sounds and chinchilla sounds and what they mean, check out my other videos, because I have many videos on my channel about chinchilla sounds. But this is one that does generally freak people out, and it freaked me out when I first got my chinchilla, because when I got my chinchilla I did not know that they made these sounds, and it was before the time of internet really. I mean, we had dial-up internet, but it took like 3 weeks to download a photo, let alone anything else. And also YouTube wasn't a thing at that stage, so I really didn't have any resources other than books to look at, and the books didn't really go into the sounds that they made. So when my chinchilla started making the alarm barking sound, I really thought there was something seriously wrong with my chinchilla. Fortunately, I had a pet shop near me that specialised in chinchillas, so I was able to go in there and ask them what the hell was going on with my chinchilla, and they were able to explain to me that yes, it's actually pretty normal. So you're lucky in a way, you have the internet to be able to help you, guide you in your journey of owning chinchillas, whereas me, I had books which weren't that great. But yeah, that is one that generally freaks people out. Next one is how small they are. Now this is something that's quite surprising to some people, because beneath that big lot of fluff, the actual animal itself is really kind of small, and it can fit into some quite tight spaces. So I've heard stories of people losing their chinchillas in gaps in floorboards, especially around plumbing areas and where there's pipe work. They tend to lose their chinchillas because their chinchillas can squeeze through the holes. Yeah, so that can be quite frightening. I have my own stories about chinchillas getting into tight spots. For example, my brother's chinchilla he got from a pet shop, and that chinchilla was very skittish, and it used to hide behind the radiators in his house. Between the radiators and the wall there wasn't a lot of space, so it was quite surprising that he could squeeze in there. All you used to see is his tail hanging out from the bottom of the radiator. Also, when I had my chinchilla Basil, my mum opened the door of my bedroom thinking that the chinchilla was in his cage, when in fact I was having him out for playtime, and the chinchilla ran down the hallway, ran down 2 flights of stairs and into the living room where we had an open fireplace because our house was a Victorian house, and he went up the chimney, which was quite frightening really. We managed to get him out and he was unharmed fortunately, but he was a bit sooty. That surprised the hell out of me, the fact that he could get into that space. But yes, they can get into some quite small spaces, so just be aware if you've got a chinchilla, their body is in fact quite small. The next one I would say is how fast they are. If you've seen them in pet shops, you might be forgiven to thinking they're quite lethargic and slow, because they are spending most of the time asleep during the day when it's pet shop time. Yeah, if you see them in a pet shop, you'll think that they don't move a lot, and even when you have them up for playtime, sometimes they just lop around and hop around and are not particularly fast. But if they want to be fast, they can be. As an example, with my chinchilla Basil, when he ran the entire way down my hallway and down 2 flights of stairs because he desperately wanted to be somewhere, it can be hard to catch them. They can also weave and dart around you. They're quite agile, so they're fast and they're agile, which can make it difficult for them to be catched if you don't have a chinchilla that is particularly used to you yet. Which is why I always suggest, if you've got a new chinchilla, keep it in a small space when you have playtime, because it's far easier to catch them and less stressful for everybody involved. Okay, Okay, the next one is the fact that their eyesight is not great. Now, you would expect a prey animal to have really super good eyesight, but in reality, during the day anyway, it's not great. They really can't see very well at all. At night, it's a little bit better because they have those huge big eyes and they can see better in low light, but even so, they are still probably not that great at eyesight. It's quite surprising because you'd think that they'd have really good eyesight being prey animals and being on the lookout all the time for predators. You'd think they'd have excellent eyesight, but in reality, really not. They don't have good eyesight. The fact that they don't have good eyesight leads to accidents happening. For example, they will often just run into a wall or run into a door, not realising that there's something in the way. It can cause a few problems, so just be aware that they don't have the best eyesight and they are likely to get into accidents every now and again. They can be quite defensive. They can make noises almost like growls at you, and they can in fact spray urine at you if they feel threatened. You can end up getting a shower from your chinchilla, but in reality they only do this if they're feeling particularly threatened, and it's normally females that spray urine, not the males. But it is something to consider when you get a chinchilla, is the fact that you may get the odd shower every now and again from a chinchilla that's feeling a little bit threatened and a little bit defensive. They can be extremely friendly, and I mean overly friendly, especially the males. So if you have a male that's on its own or with another male, sometimes they can get overly friendly with you, if you get what I mean. They can start trying to mate with you and things in the room. So for example, my chinchilla Basil, he had a habit of trying to mate with my feet and my arms as well. And also he used to mate with my soft toys that I had in my bedroom. So his favourite one was a rabbit. And yeah, this is something they can do, especially if you have a hyperactive chinchilla and it's male. This can happen. Some males will never do it because they don't have the sex drive to do it, but some males are hyperactive and they will try to mate with absolutely everything. So just bear that in mind. You might get a very friendly male chinchilla. There's not any real way to combat that other than time, and age might play a part in that. When they get older, they may stop doing that behaviour, but some chinchillas continue to do that for the rest of their lives. So it's just something you have to deal with. If you've got an overly friendly chinchilla, it's just one of those things, behaviours that you can't really stop them doing. They can fur slip. Now this is where they get extra threatened, and as a defence mechanism they may actually release some of their fur. Now this in the wild is to stop predators from actually getting them, and instead they get a clump of fur because they release some of their fur, which allows them to escape. But in captivity they still can do this. They still can release their fur, especially if they're feeling threatened and anxious or stressed. They can just release a bunch of their fur. So that is something to consider. You may not realise they can do that, but they definitely can. Okay, how clumsy they are. Now, a lot of people will say that chinchillas are really agile, which they certainly are, and they're very, good at jumping. However, I have found that chinchillas are extremely accident prone as well. They will often not look before they leap, so they will just jump into midair. They will just jump off of things without knowing what's on the bottom. They will jump and miss things constantly. It is kind of a thing that they do. They're extremely accident prone. So just be aware of that. If you've got an area that is particularly tall or a cage that is particularly tall, then just bear in mind that they can fall quite easily. And even during playtime, just don't let them climb up too high, because if they fall from that, which they often would, it can cause them some serious damage. So just bear in mind that they are extremely accident prone and they can cause chaos. So they can chew, and they do chew. They are rodents, which it might not be surprising to some people, but it wasn't really surprising to me either. But it was a surprise to my mum when she had my bedroom redecorated, and it had this lovely wallpaper on it, and then Basil came along and just started ripping it. That wasn't impressive at all from my mother, but never mind. And they will just chew anything and everything, and that is something you just have to live with. If you've got chinchillas, you've got to be prepared to expect the house to get chewed. Now that's why it is so important to have your chinchilla in a safe chinchilla environment, so where they can't chew anything that's dangerous to them, like wires and electrical equipment. They just chew, and some people are surprised by that. I don't know why, because they are rodents, but my mum was certainly surprised. He also actually chewed some of the plaster off the wall, which really annoyed my mum. Oopsie, never mind. But yeah, that was back in the day, but now I kind of accept that that is what they do, and it's one of the things that you have to just learn to love about them. So that is just a few surprising things about chinchillas, and I'm sure there are many more surprising things about chinchillas that you can tell me about in the comments. Please do, because I love reading your comments, and I shall see you in another video soon. I hope you've enjoyed footage of the chinchillas. I enjoy making these videos, so give the video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed watching it. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye for now.